Did Biden just pull off the impossible? The Israel-Hezbollah conflict has been one of the region's most volatile standoffs. But today, the US president has brokered what many are calling a miracle ceasefire deal. Is this the start of peace, or just a temporary band-aid over a wound that refuses to heal? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know everything about this historic moment and why it might just change everything. So, how did we even get here? Let's rewind. Israel and Hezbollah, the militant group based in Lebanon, have been at odds for decades. This isn't just a neighborhood dispute, it's a powder keg with implications for the entire Middle East. Over the past weeks, tensions exploded into violence, with airstrikes, missile exchanges, and mounting casualties. For ordinary people on both sides, it's been nothing short of a nightmare. Think about it, neighbors throwing missiles instead of borrowing sugar? Yeah, not exactly the hallmark holiday season. And then, enter Uncle Sam. The US has deep ties to Israel, but also knows the Middle East is a geopolitical chessboard. If this conflict spirals, it risks dragging in other players, Iran, Saudi Arabia, even Russia. With the global economy already jittery, another war isn't just bad for politics, it's bad for business. Biden's administration saw this as their moment to step up.
But here's where things get interesting and a little risky. The deal Biden proposed, it wasn't just about politics. It involved some serious give and take.
So, what's this deal all about? Essentially, it's a truce. Israel halts its military operations in Lebanon while Hezbollah agrees to cease all missile attacks. Sounds straightforward, right? But there's a twist. The US also promised to release frozen assets to Lebanon for humanitarian aid, a controversial move. Critics argue it's rewarding bad behavior, while supporters say it's a lifeline for struggling civilians. And wait till you hear how both sides reacted. It's, let's just say, not everyone's thrilled. Israel's response, a mix of relief and skepticism. Some leaders are cautiously optimistic, while hardliners worry Hezbollah will use the ceasefire to regroup. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is framing this as a victory against Western intervention. Bold claims for a group that just agreed to a ceasefire, huh? Honestly, it's like watching two kids agree to share a toy while eyeing each other to see who cheats first. And what about the rest of the world? Global powers like Russia and China are watching closely, and not just because of the drama. A stable Middle East means stable oil prices, and no one wants another energy crisis. The UN has praised the ceasefire as a step forward. But regional players like Iran, well, they're suspicious of Biden's motives.
So is this deal all sunshine and rainbows? Not quite. Let's talk about the risks.
Here's the catch. Ceasefires in this region are fragile. A single incident, a stray rocket, a rogue faction could unravel everything. And let's not forget the trust deficit. Neither side fully believes the other will stick to the terms. Some experts are already calling this a ticking time bomb, but here's the million-dollar question. What happens if the ceasefire holds? For Biden, this is more than just a foreign policy win. It's a defining moment. If the ceasefire lasts, it cements his role as a global peacemaker. But if it collapses, critics will be quick to paint him as naive, or worse, complicit. Either way, this deal will shape how history remembers his presidency. Imagine being judged not just by your actions, but by whether two ancient enemies decided to play nice. No pressure, right? Let's zoom out. This ceasefire isn't just about Israel and Hezbollah, it's about a changing world order. With the United States stepping up, it sends a message that despite all the noise, America still holds the reins in global diplomacy.
But here's the twist. If this works, could it inspire other peace efforts in conflict zones? Or will it be yet another footnote in the cycle of Middle East unrest?
And speaking of cycles, what does this mean for United States domestic politics? Stay tuned. Now that you're up to speed on the ceasefire, you're probably wondering, what does this mean for the United States itself? From shifting alliances to the upcoming elections, the ripple effects are massive. Click here to watch my video on other breaking United States news. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for more updates on international events made simple. Gap 3, S. To truly understand the gravity of the current situation, we need to delve into the historical context of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict. This is not just a recent development, it has deep roots that go back decades. The origins of Hezbollah date back to the early 1980s during the Lebanese Civil War, when the group was formed with support from Iran. Their primary aim was to resist Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon. Over the years, Hezbollah has grown into a powerful political and military force in Lebanon with significant influence in the region. On the other hand, Israel's conflict with Hezbollah is part of a larger, long-standing struggle in the Middle East. Key events like the 1982 Lebanon War, the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah War, and numerous skirmishes along the border have shaped the current landscape. Important figures such as Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, and various Israeli prime ministers have played pivotal roles in this ongoing conflict. Understanding this historical backdrop helps us see why the situation remains so volatile and why international efforts for peace are so challenging. Stay tuned, as knowing the past is crucial for comprehending the present and anticipating the future. Gap 3S. Now that we have a grasp on the historical context, let's move on to the political implications of the recent ceasefire deal in the Middle East region. This agreement, while providing a temporary respite from violence, has far-reaching consequences for all parties involved. For Israel, the ceasefire represents a chance to stabilize the region and focus on internal security and diplomatic relations. However, it also comes with the risk of appearing weak to its adversaries. For Hezbollah, the ceasefire allows them to regroup and strengthen their political influence in Lebanon, but it also raises questions about their long-term strategy and relationship with Iran. Moreover, the ceasefire has significant implications for other regional players such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Syria. Saudi Arabia, a key ally of the United States and a rival to Iran, might see this as an opportunity to push for more influence in the region. Iran, on the other hand, will likely leverage the ceasefire to bolster its support for Hezbollah and expand its reach in the Middle East. Syria, still recovering from its own civil war, remains a critical player in how this ceasefire unfolds. The international community, including the United Nations and major powers like the United States, Russia, and China, also have a vested interest in the stability of the region. The ceasefire could either pave the way for renewed peace talks or, if it fails, lead to further escalation and conflict. The delicate balance of power in the Middle East makes the political implications of this ceasefire deal incredibly complex and unpredictable. Understanding these political ramifications is crucial as we continue to monitor the situation. The road to lasting peace in the Middle East is fraught with challenges, but every step towards dialogue and negotiation is a step in the right direction. Gap 3S. Now let's delve into expert opinions on the potential long-term effects of the ceasefire agreement. Analysts and scholars from around the world have weighed in on this critical issue, offering a range of perspectives on what the future might hold. Gap 1S. Dr. Anjali Mehta, a Middle East policy expert, believes that the ceasefire could open doors for more robust diplomatic engagement. She states, "While the ceasefire is a temporary measure, it provides a crucial window for diplomatic efforts to take root. The international community must seize this opportunity to foster dialogue and build trust among the conflicting parties." Gap 1S. On the other hand, political analyst Rajiv Kumar warns of possible pitfalls. Ceasefires often come with their own set of challenges. There's always the risk that one side may use the pause in hostilities to rearm and prepare for future conflicts. This could undermine the very essence of the ceasefire, he explains. Gap 1S. Meanwhile, Dr. Layla Hassan, a renowned historian, points out the importance of understanding the underlying issues. A ceasefire is merely a band-aid if the root causes of the conflict are not addressed. Issues such as territorial disputes, political sovereignty, and economic disparities must be tackled to achieve lasting peace, she asserts. Gap 1S. Finally, international relations expert Arjun Singh highlights the role of global powers. The involvement of major players like the United States, Russia, and China will be pivotal. Their diplomatic and economic leverage could either facilitate a lasting peace or exacerbate tensions, depending on how they choose to engage with the region, he notes. Gap 1S. These expert opinions provide a comprehensive view of the complexities surrounding the ceasefire agreement. As we continue to observe the situation, it is clear that the path to enduring peace will require sustained effort, mutual understanding, an unwavering commitment from all parties involved. Gap 1S. Now let's move on to our final thoughts and the bigger picture. Gap 2S. While political dynamics and strategic maneuvers dominate headlines, the real cost of the conflict is borne by the civilians in the affected areas. Families have been torn apart, homes destroyed, and lives disrupted. Amidst the rubble and chaos, the ceasefire brings a glimmer of hope, albeit a fragile one. Gap 1S. According to recent reports, over 200,000 people have been displaced, seeking refuge in makeshift shelters and neighboring regions. Humanitarian organizations are working tirelessly to provide essential supplies such as food, water, and medical aid. However, the scale of the crisis often overwhelms their efforts. Gap 1S. We hear from Aisha Khan, a volunteer with a leading NGO. The situation on the ground is dire. Children are the most vulnerable, facing not just physical injuries but also psychological trauma. The ceasefire offers a much-needed respite, but the road to recovery will be long and arduous, she explains. Gap 1S. The ceasefire, though temporary, has allowed for humanitarian corridors to be established, enabling the safe passage of aid and the evacuation of the critically injured. This has been a lifeline for many, but the precarious nature of the truce means that these efforts could be halted at any moment. Gap 1S. Local resident Ahmed shares his story. We lost everything in the bombings. The ceasefire has given us a chance to breathe, but we live in constant fear that the fighting could resume. We need a lasting solution, not just a pause in the violence, he says, his voice tinged with both hope and despair. Gap 1S. The humanitarian impact of the conflict is a stark reminder of the urgent need for a sustainable peace. As the world watches, it is crucial that we do not lose sight of the human faces behind the statistics and political rhetoric. Gap 1S. As we wrap up, let's reflect on the broader implications of this conflict and the fragile ceasefire. The path to lasting peace is fraught with challenges, but with collective effort and unwavering commitment, it is a goal worth striving for. Gap 1S. Now let's move on to our final thoughts and the bigger picture. Gap 2S. While the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has brought a temporary halt to the violence, the international community has been closely monitoring the situation and responding accordingly. Governments, international organizations, and global leaders have all voiced their opinions on the ceasefire agreement, reflecting a diverse array of perspectives and concerns. Gap 1S. The United Nations has welcomed the ceasefire, emphasizing the need for both parties to adhere to the agreement and work towards a more permanent resolution. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres stated, "This ceasefire is a crucial step towards de-escalation, but it is imperative that all involved parties commit to dialogue and diplomacy to ensure lasting peace." Gap 1S. The European Union has also expressed support for the ceasefire, with EU High Representative Josep Borrell calling it a necessary pause in hostilities that should pave the way for comprehensive peace talks. However, he also highlighted the importance of addressing the underlying issues that have fueled the conflict. Gap 1S. In the United States, reactions have been mixed. While the Biden administration has endorsed the ceasefire, some members of Congress have raised concerns about its durability and the broader implications for regional stability. Senator Lindsey Graham remarked, "While a ceasefire is always welcome, we must remain vigilant and ensure that it leads to a sustainable peace rather than a temporary lull in violence." Gap 1S. Meanwhile, countries in the Middle East have shown a range of reactions. Iran, a key supporter of Hezbollah, has cautiously welcomed the ceasefire but urged vigilance against what it perceives as potential Israeli provocations. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, has called for a more comprehensive approach to addressing regional security concerns. Gap 1S. International humanitarian organizations have also weighed in, stressing the need for continuous support to the affected populations. The International Red Cross has called for sustained humanitarian access and urged all parties to prioritize the well-being of civilians. Gap 1S. As the world watches, the international community's response to the ceasefire deal underscores the complexity of the conflict and the multifaceted efforts required to achieve lasting peace. It is a reminder that while ceasefires can offer a temporary reprieve, the journey towards a durable resolution demands concerted and collaborative efforts from all stakeholders. Gap 1S. Now, let's move on to our final thoughts and the bigger picture. Gap 2S. While the international community's reactions to the ceasefire have been varied, one constant has been the active role of international organizations in mediating and supporting the process. The United Nations in particular has played a pivotal role in bringing the two sides to the table. Gap 1s. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has been instrumental in facilitating dialogue between Israel and Hezbollah, leveraging the UN's extensive network and diplomatic resources to create a platform for negotiations. The UN's peacekeeping forces in the region have also been crucial in monitoring the ceasefire and ensuring compliance from both sides. Gap 1s. Other international organizations have also stepped up to support the ceasefire. The European Union has not only offered diplomatic backing, but has also provided financial aid to help rebuild the affected areas and support humanitarian efforts. The EU's High Representative, Josep Borrell, has emphasized the need for a comprehensive approach that addresses both the immediate cessation of hostilities and the long-term resolution of underlying issues. Gap 1s. The International Red Cross has been on the ground, offering medical assistance and coordinating humanitarian aid to those affected by the conflict. Their efforts have been vital in alleviating the suffering of civilians and ensuring that basic needs are met during this fragile period of peace. Gap 1s. Even regional organizations like the Arab League have contributed to the mediation efforts. They have called for a united Arab stance to support the ceasefire, and have urged both Israel and Hezbollah to engage in constructive dialogue. Gap 1s. The involvement of these international organizations underscores the global commitment to achieving lasting peace in the region. Their collaborative efforts highlight the importance of multilateral diplomacy and the need for a collective approach to conflict resolution. Gap 1s. As we reflect on the role of these organizations, it becomes evident that while the path to peace is fraught with challenges, the combined efforts of the international community can pave the way for a more stable and secure future. Gap 1s. Now let's move on to our final thoughts and the bigger picture. Gap 2s. The economic ramifications of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict and the subsequent ceasefire are profound and far-reaching. Gap 1s. For Israel, the conflict has resulted in significant military expenditure, diverting funds from other critical areas such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. Gap 1s. The disruption in daily life and the damage to property have also taken a toll on the economy, affecting businesses and industries across the country. Gap 1s. Hezbollah, operating primarily from Lebanon, has faced its own set of economic challenges. Gap 1s. Lebanon's economy, already fragile due to years of political instability and financial crises, has been further strained by the conflict. Gap 1s. The cost of rebuilding damaged infrastructure and providing for displaced civilians adds to the financial burden on the Lebanese government and its people. Gap 1s. The ceasefire, while bringing a halt to the immediate violence, does not instantly resolve these economic woes. Gap 1s. However, it does open the door for international aid and investment. Gap 1s. Countries and organizations around the world have pledged financial support to help rebuild and stabilize the region. Gap 1s. The European Union, for instance, has committed substantial funds to aid reconstruction efforts and support economic recovery. Gap 1s. This financial assistance is crucial for both Israel and Lebanon as they work to rebuild their economies and restore a sense of normalcy for their citizens. Gap 1s. Additionally, the ceasefire has the potential to foster a more stable environment for trade and investment in the long run. Gap 1s. A sustained peace could lead to increased economic cooperation and development, benefiting not just the immediate region but the global economy as well. Gap 1s. However, the path to economic recovery is fraught with challenges. Gap 1s. Political stability, effective governance, and continued international support are essential to ensure that the economic benefits of the ceasefire are fully realized. So Gap 1s. As we consider the economic consequences of the conflict and the ceasefire, it becomes clear that while the immediate costs are high, the potential for long-term economic growth and stability offers a glimmer of hope for the future. Gap 1s. Now let's move on to our final thoughts and the bigger picture. Gap 2s. In the midst of the economic and political discussions, it's vital to remember the human faces behind the conflict and the ceasefire. Gap 1S. These personal stories and testimonies offer a glimpse into the lives of those directly impacted by the turmoil. Gap 1S. Meet Aisha, a young mother from southern Lebanon who had to flee her home with her children when the conflict escalated. Gap 1S. Her voice trembles as she recounts the fear and uncertainty they faced, but there's also a note of hope as she speaks about the ceasefire. Gap 1S. We just want peace, she says. We want our children to grow up without the sound of bombs. Gap 1S. On the other side of the border we hear from David, an Israeli shop owner whose business was nearly destroyed by a rocket attack. Gap 1S. He talks about the challenges of rebuilding and the support he's received from his community. Gap 1S. It's been tough, he admits, but the ceasefire gives us a chance to start over, to rebuild our lives. Gap 1S. These stories are a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the profound impact of peace. Gap 1S. They also highlight the resilience and determination of ordinary people who strive to create a better future for themselves and their families. Gap 1S. As we listen to Aisha and David, we are reminded that behind every statistic and political statement, there are real people with dreams, fears, and hopes. Gap 1S. Their testimonies underscore the importance of striving for lasting peace and stability in the region. Gap 1S. Now let's move on to our final thoughts and the bigger picture. Gap 1S. As we reflect on the personal stories of Aisha and David, it's natural to wonder about the future prospects for peace and stability in the region. Gap 1S. The ceasefire agreement has brought a temporary halt to the hostilities, but what lies ahead? Gap 1S. Experts suggest that the road to lasting peace will be fraught with challenges, from political tensions to economic recovery. Gap 1S. Yet there is also a cautious optimism. Gap 1S. Initiatives aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding between communities are gaining momentum. Gap 1S. International organizations are stepping up efforts to provide humanitarian aid and support reconstruction efforts. Gap 1S. It's a complex and delicate process, but there's hope that with sustained effort and cooperation, a more peaceful and stable region can emerge. Gap 1S. The ceasefire is a crucial first step, but it must be followed by concrete actions and commitments from all parties involved. Gap 1S. As we move forward, the voices of ordinary people like Aisha and David will play a vital role in shaping the future. Gap 1S. Their resilience and determination serve as a beacon of hope, reminding us that peace is not just a political goal, but a deeply human aspiration. Gap 1S. With continued support and solidarity from the international community, there is a real possibility for a brighter, more peaceful future in the region. Gap 1S. Stay tuned as we explore the bigger picture and the broader implications of the ceasefire agreement. Gap 1S. As we draw to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on the key points we've discussed throughout this video. Gap 1S. The Israel-Hezbollah conflict has a long and complex history, deeply rooted in political, territorial, and ideological disputes. Gap 1S. The recent ceasefire agreement marks a significant, albeit temporary, halt to the hostilities. Gap 1S. The involvement of the US and other international players has been pivotal in brokering this deal, highlighting the global stakes in regional peace and stability. Gap 1S. Gap 1S. We've seen how the reactions from Israel and Hezbollah have shaped the immediate aftermath of the ceasefire, with both sides expressing cautious optimism and skepticism. Gap 1S. The international community's response has been varied, with some nations supporting the deal and others calling for more comprehensive measures. Gap 1S. Gap 1S. The humanitarian impact of the conflict has been profound, with countless lives affected and communities torn apart. Gap 1S. The ceasefire offers a glimmer of hope for recovery and rebuilding, but the road ahead is fraught with challenges. Gap 1S. Economic consequences, political implications, and the need for sustained international support are all critical factors that will determine the future of the region. Gap 1S. Gap 1S. As we look to the future, the personal stories and testimonies we've shared remind us of the human cost of conflict and the enduring hope for peace. Gap 1S. The resilience of individuals like Aisha and David serves as a powerful reminder that peace is not just a political goal, but a deeply human aspiration. Gap 1S. Gap 1S. The ceasefire is a crucial first step, but it must be followed by concrete actions and commitments from all parties involved. Gap 1S. With continued support and solidarity from the international community, there is a real possibility for a brighter, more peaceful future in the region. Gap 1S, Gap 1S. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict and the ceasefire agreement. Gap 1S. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you in-depth analysis and insights on global issues. Gap 1S. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged. Gap 1S. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.